deal with airplane peanuts.
From Norm Macdonald and Shane Gillis,
Louis, Chappelle, Norm, Burr, and then it's Bernie Mac or Patrice.
To Joe Rogan and Richard Pryor.
Did you ever meet Richard?
I actually worked with Richard for 5 weeks in a row.
These are your favorite comedians' biggest inspirations. Starting off with the man who's brought more eyeballs to the world of stand-up comedy than anyone in recent history. Joe Rogan has skyrocketed the popularity of this art form while transforming the careers of countless comics. But the Podcast King's first real exposure to stand-up came when he was just 15 years old, when his mom took him to see Richard Pryor's Live on the Sunset Strip, an experience that had a profound impact on young Joe Rogan from that day forward.
He was the reason why I even understood what comedy was. When I was 15 years old, my parents took me to see Live on the Sunset Strip in the movie theater. And I'll never forget, because I had seen a bunch of great movies like Stripes and, you know, all these funny movies. I had never laughed so hard as I was laughing at this guy who was just talking. And I couldn't imagine that this was like, how is this happening? So I'm sitting in the audience and I remember looking around while I was laughing and people are falling out of their chairs. They're throwing their arms up in the air. They couldn't breathe. And I was like, this is amazing. All this guy's doing is talking. And that planted the seed in my mind about what stand-up comedy is.
Richard Pryor inspired more than one of the comedians in today's video, so be sure to stick around till the end if you want to hear the entire list. Because up next is Chris Rock, whose biggest comedic inspiration came from Bill Cosby. The concept of being inspired by Bill Cosby might sound wild to people nowadays, but before becoming a mixologist, Bill Cosby used to be one of the biggest names in comedy, period, and was a major influence on Chris Rock, who claims Bill Cosby as the greatest of all time, and even says that his work is of such high caliber that no one even attempts to copy it.
None of Bill Cosby's material is predicated on a reference point. Every joke is so good that it withstands the reference, and almost all of them would work today.
Yes, because
the same way. And you can't say that about any other comedian.
That's so interesting.
Bill Cosby played a role in inspiring another all-time great comedian, Jerry Seinfeld, who claims that it was seeing people like Cosby and George Carlin on television telling jokes as a job that made young Jerry obsessed with the craft.
Once I knew I had some ability, I did not care if my life was going to be a absolutely minimal hand-to-mouth existence of just barely getting by. I didn't care. I go, I want to be in this life. And this is really the key aspect of a comedian, is that you want to be this and you don't care about anything else.
Jerry Seinfeld not only went on to become the first comedy billionaire ever, but also inspired thousands of young comics through his stand-up and sitcom, including one of the best joke writers alive today, Mark Normand.
I was doing him when I started, and it was embarrassing. Did you do a guy in the beginning?
I did Jenny.
Okay.
I caught myself on stage once going, oh.
Yes, dude, I did
exactly like him.
I did an open mic in New York, and in New York they were ruthless. And I was walking to the mic, and some kid in the back went, bah, 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 and it crushed me.
Speaking of Mark Normand, Kevin Hart used his booming stand-up career to become one of the biggest movie stars in the world. But it's possible that none of this would have ever happened without the influence of Eddie Murphy.
Me and Eddie Murphy talked. I'm like, Eddie, you're a large reason why I'm doing stand-up comedy.
It's never a white guy, but be that as it may.
What if I said Dice was the reason? I started because of Dice.
You know you're a living legend when multiple people at the top of their game cite you as their biggest inspiration, which is definitely the case with Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock, who both played a massive influence in the career of Tom Segura.
I think I'm at my funniest as a stand-up on stage when I go on stage in a silly mood. Really? Silly for me is the best way
it's
to.
Like you loosen up your Rolex and go, it's so loose.
I just feel
Where
like
are my Porskies?
I just feel like silly is fun, like playful.
Yeah.
And like it's the best way for me to go on stage, and I forget. And the person that reminds me of that is actually Eddie Murphy. Because Eddie Murphy, when he was like 21 doing stand-up, there was a silliness with which he went on stage. And so I try to remind myself of that. Like I'll just look at a photo of him, just like I'm saying, he was so masterful, but there's like that silliness is what I aspire to be like.
Widely considered one of the best comedians working today, Shane Gillis had a plethora of comedic inspirations throughout the years, such as Chappelle, Burr, and Patrice. But by far, the two biggest influences on the Shane Gillis we all know today were Louis C.K. and Norm Macdonald.
When people were going through it, Norm was one of the guys that would always reach out. Yeah, that was it. Just reached out. He sent me some cool stuff about, like, funny will win.
Yeah,
that was the coolest shit ever. He was like, "There's a war right." I don't want to spill the beans on a nice thing, but it was like
you guys had a private thing.
Yeah, it was cool.
But
and
he
it
was
ended,
very supportive when you were going
he
through your
spoke
stuff.
like poetically.
Yeah,
it was awesome. And it ended. One of the messages ended with like, "In a war for comedy, I think the ones with jokes will win." It's just like, yo,
yeah,
that's fire.
Norm Macdonald is king.
Yeah,
yeah.
And he in no way has to do that.
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
To reach out, you know, especially at that time, I thought was really cool.
It was 2 years ago. I mean,
yeah, as he's battling something, no disrespect, way worse.
Yeah. As we've seen thus far, most comedy greats were inspired by the legends of the previous generation, and Bill Burr was no different. Before we hear Bill Burr's biggest comedy inspiration, we gotta take a quick break to hear from the sponsor of today's video, MyBookie. It's the best time of year when it comes to sports, and MyBookie is the best way to get in on the fun, especially if you take advantage of their 100% first-time deposit match, which basically means whatever amount of money you put in to bet with the first time, MyBookie will give you the same amount for free, only when you use our promo code JKWRLD. MyBookie also has a super easy cash out system, odd boosting, crypto payments, and the possibility to watch live games on their website while you bet. My favorite play this weekend is over 51 in the Eagles-Dolphins game, but let me hear your favorite picks in the comments. Again, use promo code JKWRLD to claim your 100% cash bonus. Now back to the video. Burr once said that he was inspired to pursue stand-up comedy after watching Robin Williams perform on The Tonight Show, and that watching Robin's performance gave him the courage to take the risk of entering the world of stand-up comedy. Aside from both being angry gingers, Andrew Santino has another thing in common with Bill Burr. They were both inspired to pursue comedy in the first place by comedians who were masters of improv and acting.
You know, when I was a kid, I spoke about this the other day. When I was a kid working with Jim on camera, Carrie would have been like the greatest thing ever. He was my boss for this show I did called I'm Dying Up Here.
That's right.
But
which was great.
That was always my dream. Thank you, dude. That was my dream to like, still to this day, would be the killer to work on camera with that guy.
Right.
I don't think it'll ever happen now because of the circumstances, because I don't know how often he'll come back on camera. But
I think he will. I mean, he still seems to.
I hope.
You know, I think it's all. You know, hey, listen, something beautiful is written.
Yeah.
That's where the hope turns
exactly.
into a possibility.
I think he would come back if given the perfect project.
So far, we've taken a look at who's inspired the careers of some of the biggest comedy legends ever, from Chris Rock to Jerry Seinfeld. But what comedians are inspiring the next generation of household names?
I was a huge fan of Dane Cook and Dave Chappelle when I was like 12, 13, 14. And my mom won tickets on the radio to see Dane at Nationwide Arena in Columbus. It was like nosebleed seats, obviously, but I was just like so in all of the show. We went, it was incredible. And since that moment, I was like obsessed with it. So then a couple weeks go by, there's a talent show at school. I'm like, oh, I want to try it. So I do it there. And of course it was terrible.
Oh, but you got balls, dude.
But, I mean, it was awful, dude. I was doing all these raunchy jokes that I had gotten off the internet in front of my classmates.
It's ballsy, though.
I was so naive. It's not, you don't think of it as brave when you don't know that there could be consequences.
True.
And then when I was 15, I found out what an open mic was, and I just emailed the Columbus Funny Bone, Stroop.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I know you have to be 21 and up, but like, I really want to try what an open mic is. Like, could I come if I had like my parents with me or something? And he happened to say yes. And ever since then, it's just been comedy every single week.
At Joke World. That's did it. At Joke World.
And the world is WRLD.
That's a great YouTube channel, Joke World. Check it out.